saw a quote floating around Facebook recently that said, "An unfortunate trend has occurred in many churches, the separation of preaching and worship. The term worship has become almost synonymous with singing, especially contemporary music." Gotta get that dig in. "The separation of worship and preaching is unnatural at best and harmful at worst." End quote. Honestly, in one sense, he's right. Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, I'm Colin, the resident nerd and Bible scholar here at the Bible Uncut and Unfiltered. I worked behind the scenes on church staff for years. Internally, the music portion is quite often called the worship service. People are scheduled for worship, meaning the songs, and then there's the teaching afterward. Functionally, most churches do treat singing as worship and preaching as something else, more educational, more informational. So I actually kind of get the lament. On paper, it sounds very spiritual and godly to say we have lost something. Though, yes, I definitely did roll my eyes a bit, the obligatory fundy dig at contemporary Christian music. That's a separate conversation, though. Here's where I think the argument actually misses the point. The idea that preaching is, or should be, the central act of Christian worship is actually a really modern invention in church history. For most of Christianity's existence, sermons were short. 10 minutes, 15, maybe 20. A homily. Not a TED Talk, not a theological download, not a 45-minute exposition of one guy's interpretive framework. The hour-long sermon, or sometimes multiple-hour sermon, depending on your tradition, where one person explains the Bible to a silent audience, that's largely the product of the last few hundred years, particularly in certain Protestant traditions. Even today, the majority of Christians around the world don't experience church that way. Historically, preaching was one part of worship, not the main point, though. And that leads us to the bigger issue. Worship is inherently active. It's participatory, it's embodied, it's something you do. Singing, active, praying together, active, confession, communion, generosity, shared meals, caring for one another, all active. Preaching, though, for the most part, at least for the audience, it's pretty passive. You sit, you listen, maybe you nod along, maybe even say amen once or twice. Now, that doesn't make preaching bad or unnecessary, but it does mean we should be careful about calling it the pinnacle of worship. And here's where I want to gently flip the original critique on its head. I don't think the problem is that preaching has lost its primacy. I think the problem is actually that we have given preaching too much focus. Somewhere along the way, church became centered on hearing a message instead of being a people. But when you read the New Testament, especially passages like Acts 2, the heartbeat of the early church was not a sermon-centric experience. It was community. It was their shared meals. It was meeting one another's needs, radical generosity, presence together, embodied love. The church didn't primarily gather to hear someone talk about Jesus. They gathered to practice the way of Jesus together. And that's also why I get uneasy with how much authority and spiritual weight we place on pastors in many American churches today. Too many people treat their pastors' opinions as if it's the voice of God. But the church doesn't just happen behind a pulpit. It happens when people show up for each other, when the hungry are fed, when the lonely are seen, when forgiveness is practiced, when love takes on flesh outside the four walls of the sanctuary. And preaching can support that. It can guide it. It can challenge it. But it was never meant to replace it. So, yes, worship is in fact more than singing. But it's also more than preaching. Worship is a lived communal response to God. And if our services leave us really informed but not deeply formed, really inspired but not actually loving it, then maybe the issue isn't that preaching and worship have been separated. Maybe it's that we've misunderstood what worship was supposed to be in the first place.